that's why that sounds so nice, is that we have this really...
Hey, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Jake.
And welcome to the Vinyl Verdict. And Jake is my good friend who came by to analyze some Badfinger songs and some other things at a deeper level. We got a guitar for the first time on the Vinyl Verdict, and we're going to break some of this down. I just showed Jake some of the early Badfinger live stuff from the BBC. We listened to the hits, and then we went into like the Dave Mason songs, Feelin' Alright, and Only You Know and I Know. And you had some pretty interesting takeaways.
One of the things we talked about was kind of this scooped tone that comes from having a wah pedal on that wasn't really activated at the time.
Yeah. It's so weird that, because like today you would just click off the wah when you're not using it, but he just left it.
Yeah. And it's funny because you had pointed it out and I was like, that might be what it is. And you could hear at one point the wah like kind of scoops forward. Heavy pentatonic leads, a lot of them in the higher register of the guitar, kind of this classic box shape that so many kind of blues inspired guitar players of the era would use in order to create leads. As a guitar teacher, I really try to emphasize, hit your chord tones. And what I mean by that is, we have this song that's going between D7, G, right? And the idea is that when you go to this D7, a lot of times we're taught you can use this minor pentatonic scale. And the reason is because you have this flat 7 in the chord. So the idea is this note sounds really nice right there, right? But the idea is that when we go to this one chord, and then we go to what's called our 4 chord being G, we have this major third right here, and this is not part of the scale. So the idea is that when you land on that chord, it can be really nice to try to hit that major third. You're highlighting the chord tone that gives it its name, being G major. Without even chords, you can hear me kind of play the song. Like... There's that major third right there. So I can highlight that with my own lead playing without even having the chord progression there. And a lot of the phrases that we were kind of hearing during the jams were just, kind of triplet ideas. Like a lot of kind of signature licks like that. But then we also have these really nice kind of landing spots. Really highlighting going to that 4 chord. And that's, what I would kind of call more advanced level blues playing.
We listened to kind of what their live scene was like. At the time, obviously, they're playing no matter what and stuff live also. But now we're going to go 1 year further.
I love it. Like that chord right there. I mean, you can do so much with it because it's a dominant chord that also has a minor third in it. So it's the best possible chord to play a minor blues pentatonic scale on. Something kind of like that. Again, like it. A lot of those kind of little quick triplet types of runs, like obviously those are improvised, but kind of going off of what he's doing, and to kind of recreate his tone. A neck pickup, kind of scooping a little bit of the tone off of here. These are naturally really bright, twangy guitars, so to be able to get that really deep, kind of rich, saturated sound that it gets, you really kind of have to scoop a lot of the tone off of it, while still making sure you can really hear the clarity of the notes. It's not really causing any kind of issues on the recording. It sounds amazing. Yeah, but I love that. And you would hear stuff. I mean, I feel like the first time I ever heard someone do that level of bend was on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Yeah. There's a bend very similar to that.
Agreed. Which intro definitely predates all this.
Yeah, exactly.
But influenced him dramatically. I mean, it's contemporary.
Yeah.
It's like on a Beatles track. Like sometimes the songs you get the George songs are the most exciting because you get to hear the harmonies of John and Paul on it. Sure. It's kind of similar. Like I think some of Pete's best guitar work is on songs by other members. So we're gonna do. That was a Joey song.
Cool.
We'll do one by Tom.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna show you the Pete song.
Sure. But what's cool is that you think that the song's going to be in the key of E, but then it ends up being in the key of A. So it's actually highlighting the 5 chord. So it's like, but then when it goes, it's kind of like that. That's highlighting the 4 chord, and then we're back in the key of A. Really interesting. That intro alone is amazing. I could analyze how cool that is. So that's awesome. Things that, I was kind of just noticing is like, lot of pentatonic, but he's really going for these like kind of wide bends, like you were pointing out. Right there, going from the root to the minor third. It's still very pentatonic, but he does get like some of these kind of cool chord tones, especially like the beginning of the solo, like. It's all just kind of hitting chord tones. Right, like he does a really good job of following these chords. I would need to obviously hear it again to like really pick out some of the licks that I really liked. But using efficiency as much as possible, like down, up, down, up, down, up, down, like something like that. Just to get like I could pick all of it, but you do lose a little bit of that pull off. Kind of gives it a little bit of this legato-ness, which. He has a lot of this kind of smoothness to his playing. That I mean, he's going for that. Like by going for this kind of tone on this, like he wants his sound very rounded.
He's got such good rhythm even when he's doing lead that like he doesn't miss a 8th note or a 16th note.
If I were to analyze his biggest strength as a lead guitar player, it's his timing. Yeah. He is so good at always landing his phrases right when you want to hear them. Yeah. Some people, they try to fit in too many notes. And they kind of lose a sense of the time, but it's very much feels like if I were to go and try to transcribe something like this, right, the sheet music would look clean.
Maybe it's improv, but he still knows exactly, like you're saying, where he wants the phrase to be.
Yeah.
And it's melodic and he finishes it, right?
I was hearing like a lot of inspiration for people like even like Slash, Kirk Hammett from Metallica, like a lot of those players. It's like it starts out not wah and then kicks in partway through. And you see that a lot with those kind of more modern hard rock guitar players that now we kind of all look up to in the new generation. I think a lot of that is inspired by that because like that era is not people weren't using wahs other than like Clapton obviously and Hendrix and stuff like that, but you choosing to turn it on and off like that you don't hear that all the time. Usually it's on the whole time. Obviously there's so much music to comb through and there's many examples that break this, but to me I'm hearing Slash right there. I know that sounds kind of interesting.
I was thinking also that because they were known for slide playing, obviously, like the Day After Day song, right? It's like him and George doing slide. So he puts that in that middle solo. It's like he gives you the slide piece, and then he's going to go off and do this other thing that is maybe a little bit ahead of its time.
Yeah, it's cool that like that. I love that kind of phrasing. When you're talking about like that idea of like it feels like a whole scale now, it's because he's like adding in scale tones that are not pentatonic for the first time in a little bit, reintroducing that. So so much of it is like. Right, he's doing all these kind of really great blues licks, and all of a sudden, all these kind of ideas of taking non-pentatonic notes that are part of the, the major scale modes. Saying goes, that's your 9th right there again. Jazzy. Pentatonic scale, the reason that so many guitar players use it is, we have our root note, our minor third, our 4th, our 5th, flat 7th, and root. So it covers so much ground of not only the chord tones that you want, but also the notes that you want to bend or use as a pivot tone, I guess, right? Like something like a 4th wants to go down to the minor 3rd, for example, or this flat 7 really wants to go to the root, and kind of has this kind of motion to it. Well, there's other notes in the natural minor scale that are not used in it. I almost teach it. The pentatonic is like the skeleton to your natural minor scale. That's taught to every musician in classical music and so on and so on. So the idea is we're selecting certain kind of chord and non-chord tones that guitar players have been using now, since like the 60s to kind of come up with these really great, or even 50s, these really great melodies. Once you start expanding your harmony and really understanding the other notes you can use, that's why that sounds so nice, is that we have this really kind of a little bit more movement, and you can spend a little bit more time descending which then kind of as a listener, it gives you more gratification having to wait for you to hear that last chord toning.
What's the history of octave pedals? How are they normally used? Is this a good application?
Ooh, I mean, I don't want to sound stupid here because there's going to be someone watching this that probably knows more than I do. I mean, in modern day application, they're used all the time. One of the most popular songs on the planet is Seven Nation Army. Everybody thinks that that's played on a bass. It's played out with an octave pedal on a guitar, you know?
Yeah, but maybe picking up, connecting some of the dots you've pointed out even. It's like Badfinger does have this tendency in their live performances to activate a pedal halfway through a solo and an outro to kind of build some dimension to it. It's a 4-piece band, at least during this time. There's one weird caveat there, but 4-piece band, and so maybe instead of doing the wah-wah or the slide, they're using the octave pedal by this time.
He has a unique style. I think so much of it is how accurate he is. I feel like so many of the guitar players of that era are just like kind of sloppy. The kind of technicality, that kind of stuff doesn't kind of really come until like the late 70s. Like, you know, you start to see it more with like the Van Halens or the early era like Scorpions or like bands like that. But you don't really have these like crazy ripping virtuoso types. You have, you know, the amazing Hendrix and Clapton of that era, but like the kind of technicality, for example, that's expected today compared to back then is very different. Jimmy Page now is looked at as being a very sloppy guitar player, but at the time, Led Zeppelin, he was considered this guitar god in a lot of the ways because of how good his songs are and his note choices, and he's a composer when he's playing these solos. What I would say is like with this band that really stands out to me is like they're not only writing these really cool chord progressions, they're also writing lead parts that fit them. And you see a lot of times groups that would write these really great songs, and when it would come time for them to play a guitar solo, it felt like they could have played that guitar solo over any blues progression, not these kind of cool parts that they're writing, and using really good phrasing. I mean, we were talking about the triplet phrasing. That's something that really stands out. That's a very hard thing to keep in time really well. That's very well practiced. You can hear that there's a lot of attention to detail of like, I'm gonna play this as if I'm a drummer and like have like almost like rudiments and like make sure that it's really lined up. And that's what stands out to me. And it's like, even with modern day, the amount of amazing guitar players that have come and gone since these recordings, that is something that is unique to me, is how crisp and attention to detail there is to the timing of the phrases, and that's really special.
Is there anything you don't like about his playing? Which I could take out too, but I'm curious. Or repetitive?
The only thing that's repetitive to me is some of the tones. You know, choosing to play kind of in this deeper kind of sound. We didn't really hear. Sometimes guitar players, you know, they'll kind of go from the deeper sound, and then and being able to switch between all that kind of stuff, right? Like being able to switch between the pickups and trying to get as much of a different sound out of your instrument. Maybe that, but that's not even a criticism. I love his tone. I think it's so cool. You know, distortion in that era is still a little bit more like primitive in some ways. Like, you know, we don't really have the same kind of technology that we do now. And that like a lot of people are kind of discovering these new pedals, these new amps that are kind of doing this. So really, to me, I mean, that guitar tone is pretty damn good.
I love how deep it is. Anything about the Beatles, like obviously when we hear the songs, these hit songs, it's very Beatlesque, the harmonies and everything. Is anything about the guitar playing Beatlesque?
The rhythm parts, yes. You hear it a lot in the harmony choices, like the songwriting decisions. Yeah. The actual lead playing it could not be more different in my opinion. Yeah. It's so much more saturated, really kind of this virtuoso playing. You know, George is one of the greatest guitar players ever. Same with Paul and John. But obviously, they're not these virtuosos in this kind of sense, right? Mm-hmm. They set the groundwork, and so much of their guitar playing is about these perfect parts that fit the song. This to me is not only kind of that, but it's also, this dude is ripping right now, right? Like he's showing off how good he is. And I never thought of George in that kind of way, for example, as like a more of a lead guitarist.
And that's why it's so, he definitely had more country roots.
Yeah.
They didn't want to totally mimic that, but I feel like they were always intrigued by it. Like George was intrigued about that proficient, and that's why I think he brought Clapton into a lot of tracks. And so I think Pete Ham also kind of scratched that itch for them a little bit, and that's why maybe they signed him even.
Well, Pete Ham's guitar playing is there are a lot of similarities to Clapton in it. Yeah, I hear a lot of like especially Cream era Clapton guitar playing. it's arpeggiated, for example, like that's very Beatles. Like I think a lot of it is
the descending progression is very Lennon. I think
it is. Yeah, I think that's really what it is. Is I think the Beatles were very prolific in really thinking about bass movement with their chords, right? And it's a very kind of classical mindset of like we can have counter melody in their bass line.
Disclaimer, like we're only covering the guitar stuff today, like lead guitar work.
Sure.
They have incredible melodies in there and chord progressions and lyrics and everything, and we're just ignoring all of that for the sake of it. And that part is really Beatles. That's why I'm curious. I actually think you're right. It probably isn't super tight. This is one of the more unique parts of Badfinger is the lead guitar playing.
I think so. I mean it's definitely very elevated. I mean, it's impressive. Talking about the harmony of the chord progressions and things like that is really important in talking about the lead playing because the lead playing doesn't exist without that.
Yeah.
You need that kind of call and response. You need the harmony to make something prolific.
Totally.
And he's able to do that because the songs are well written.
Yeah.
Really good. It's still very pentatonic, but it's still creative, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, over D minor. Right, those are the two parts, I think.
Yeah.
It's really nice, just moving in thirds.
Yeah.
Good. What it sounds like is a fuzz of some sort, and a lot of the times on fuzz pedals, you can kind of actually adjust things to make it so that you have less attack.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so that's part of the reason a lot of people like to use them is they kind of almost give that kind of scoop sound. It almost in some ways, it kind of creates that same effect that you get with these like reverse guitars that you'd like sometimes hear like George do and stuff like that, where you lose the attack, and it's like it's kind of a satisfying sound. But like right there, right, that's all in D minor pentatonic. That's so it kind of pulls you into it because that's a big minor third bend. So it's being able to do that, it's a finger strength kind of thing. Being able to hit that every time. Hitting that every time instead of just going right to the note.
Yeah, you're right. He's going all the way back. That's crazy.
And that's what makes it sound so cool.
Interesting.
And you have the rest of your pentatonic right there. But yeah, it's really nice. It's a really good way to highlight the D minor because you have that's your fifth right there going into your minor seventh.
That's cool.
And there's your root. So like all that, like whereas I think all in D major. Like all that kind of stuff right there. Like what I'm actually doing is I'm using what we call the relative minor pentatonic. So the idea is you're in the key of D major, which shares a key signature with B minor. Right? So the idea is that I can use B minor pentatonic ideas as long as I'm landing on the D major chord tones in order to really get that kind of sound. So that's kind of what gives you that pentatonic but still kind of country in sound. Right, I'm landing on that. All that kind of ideas, right? And that's all those are all notes in the B minor pentatonic, the B minor / D major pentatonic, to be clear. I love that kind of style of playing. Very Allman Brothers.
It is.
I think there's something kind of cool about it, and from us doing this episode, I didn't actually see him physically playing the guitar until the very end right there. Kind of just in this zone. I mean, you were kind of pointing this out. It's like, he's not even looking at his fretboard. He's kind of just zoning out. He's, when you see that, you kind of are like, okay, this person knows their fretboard. They're really like using their ear. They're really focused, and they're making sure they go to the right notes. And sometimes it's kind of good to zone out or close your eyes or do your thing,
Yeah.
I'm blown away because I feel like I'm constantly coming across, amazing guitar players in history and in modern day, and it's cool seeing I feel like someone kind of lost a little bit in the kind of guitar god narrative of the time period, and I think it's too bad in a lot of ways, but it's also never too late to discover someone who's really amazing. Just watching him improvise in that clip just now, I mean, it's just, he's so good. I mean, to simplify it here, he's so good. I mean, those ideas I was kind of just showing right there, it's like, I learned those from other guitar players. I'm sure that, his playing translated to them, which then got to me somehow, That's kind of the beauty of lead playing, is everybody's always stealing from each other. Earlier, off the episode, we were listening to the songs. I knew a lot of those parts and songs, but, some of this more deep cut, and especially this album that you were kind of talking about earlier. Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing. The production level for the era is really good. I mean, just kind of how tight the drums are and everything like that. I mean, we'll talk about that, in the future. But,
yes, we'll do a drum episode.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe we can bring a drum
for that.
Yeah. Well, there's other people who know more than me, but I definitely love talking about arrangements and things like that.
Yeah, no,
but it's really, I mean, that record for '74. I mean, the idea that was pulled off shelf sounding like that's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time on this. We love having you on Vinyl Verdict, our first guest ever. Let's give a round of applause out there.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for showing me so much good music.
Give us suggestions. If there's a Badfinger song or another song that you want Jake to dissect for you, he might be willing to do it. So comment below.
I can actually take time to learn it this time and come in and talk about the parts. But a lot of it can be simplified down to like really tasteful pentatonic playing, but there's some really, really cool ideas in these songs, and it's cool to talk about and dissect with you. So
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.